could not be where it is today without support, vision and passion of one man, President Vladimir Putin.
Mr. President, members of the International Olympic Committee, Sochi is a unique place. On the seashore, you can enjoy a fine spring day, but up in the mountains, it's winter. We are allocating around sum of $12 billion for this. Mesdames et messieurs, soutenez s'il vous plaît le rêve olympique de millions de Russes. The Olympic family is going to feel at home in Sochi. Thank you.
It's an easy interview for you.
Yeah.
Starting with 1.5 minutes for free.
Good, this is a surprise. I didn't know you were going to show this, but of course I assume, not only because it's your project that we all know, but also because the Olympic Games, the Winter Games just started, again in a new political realm, perspective, situation. Are you not regretting you doing a second project on the Olympic Games?
You mean in Korea?
This time, yeah.
Well, we started such a project in 2009, so that was more than 4 years before the Games in Sochi.
Yeah, but you got experience.
Yeah, we could have done it quicker indeed. Well, my interest is not necessarily in South Korea, so no.
So there's no itching.
Maybe in the future, I don't know.
No.
Yeah, you could also center it around the FIFA World Championships or any event. It's more. Actually, we were not interested in Olympic Games at all. So it was all about our interest in the Caucasus. We were traveling there already in 2007, and we wanted to have a reason to be there and to show stories. And then we heard about the Olympic Winter Games in Sochi, so we started working there.
So it was a little present for you then?
Yeah, it was absolutely a present, especially because we knew that Putin was, of course, using these games as a big propaganda tool. And so we thought we can also use these games as a propaganda tool for different kind of stories. Yeah.
Yeah, and it worked out pretty well. No, I mean, your project has been a big success as well. Putin is not talking about it, but
No, but
he probably heard about it in a way.
I have no clue. I don't know. I don't know nothing about it. But of course, we had a big exhibition in Moscow that was cancelled, and so that's a kind of let's say some authorities in Russia knew about the project and didn't want it to be seen. And that's the reason why they tried to prevent us from doing this kind of work, and afterwards banned us from the country, and also avoided that the work was being shown in Russia. But basically we were very happy that they did, because it guaranteed a lot of free promotion for the project.
Yeah. Can people buy the book there, do you know?
In Russia?
Yeah.
We sent some books to Russia, but the books are not for sale in a bookstore. So, but I think if you send it, I mean, they're not opening every package, so yeah, they can buy it.
You could.
Russians are traveling a lot, so they can also buy the book somewhere else. And the website that contains all information, stories, everything is also translated into Russian. So I think people can
People know about it. Yeah. And can you go ever back there, or?
Well, I have the intention to try again in a couple of months, because then I'm Arnold as well, the writer in the project. We are banned then for 5 years.
Arnold van Brugge?
Yeah, and it seems to be kind of magical moment that you can start over again, maybe, but it might also take a little bit more. I don't know, but we'll see. I would love to go back, so yeah.
Yeah, but this project, the Sochi project, is finished for you. It's closed.
Yeah, such a project for us is finished, or at least the work is finished, but the project itself is still traveling, and or at least the exhibitions are traveling, and the work is still on display. It's just finished in December in Italy, and now it's going to Germany. So there's still interest, and that's also because the FIFA games are the FIFA World Championships. They are also being held in Russia, also in Sochi. There's a stadium. The political situation in Russia didn't really change. The situation in the Caucasus didn't really change, meaning that there is no news from the North Caucasus, although there is still a civil war going on. At least we consider it a civil war. Nobody knows about it because Russia prevents journalists from working over there.
But you still try to follow what's happening.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
You know people there.
Yeah. We try to stay in contact with people over there. Young people is easy because they're on Facebook, and older people is sometimes more difficult. But we sent a book around one person. That's Gava Gazanova. That's our book about the North Caucasus. Because within the Sochi project, we made a final publication. I brought one final publication, so if you're interested, then you can see it afterwards.
That's the Atlas?
That's the Atlas of War and Tourism, but within the project, also because it was a private funding project, a crowdfunding project, we also had, that's the first edition, that one is sold out, but the second one is here with the beautiful quote of the CEO of Sochi 2014 on the cover. Well, it started with Vladimir Putin. That was the first quote we used on the cover, and then this is the quote of the CEO during the end ceremony. Also broadcast, of course, on millions of televisions worldwide. And he said, "This is the new face of Russia, our Russia." And we thought, yeah, that's what we did all the time. We used their slogans and their propaganda to put it in a different context on our alternative stories from the region. Yeah.
I wondered actually, we never talked about this, but it's such a large project that you said you worked there for years with not only with Arnold, but with a group of designers, with Kummer and Herman, and there were many publications, there were exhibitions traveling, there were debates, there was a website, there was a crowdfunding, it was actually a huge project, especially when you talk about photography, international photography. I mean, there are bigger projects, but this was really substantial. And you were still young, and you're still a relatively young photographer. So
26 now.
26. So I'm asking this because I saw your new book, and I thought, well, Rob is still so consistent in his photography. Was there for yourself any conclusion as being a photographer, or being an artist, or being a visual person after that project?
Well, the most important thing I learned during the Sochi project is a kind of a very strong belief that if you want to do something, that you can really do it yourself. So this do-it-yourself mentality is a thing I already believed in, but this project proved more or less for me and for Arnold that we can really do it. We started the project, which was a kind of completely impossible financially to finance, to fund, because nobody, no newspapers, magazines, whatever, were interested in stories from the Caucasus or from Abkhazia or from Sochi at all until a couple of weeks before the Olympic Winter Games. So how can you finance a project like this? And we were strong believers that the stories over there were so important that we had to bring it into the world. And then we set up our own system by convincing people to invest in the project. And different ways to make it all possible. And this whole system in the end made the project possible, and that's very important. I mean, we could do whatever we wanted to do over there, completely independent. We were not also not only independent from financing the project, but also, for example, if you go for a magazine over there, then you're financed for 2 or 3 days or 4 days or a week maybe in a very ideal situation. And you can publish 10 or 15 images in a magazine, but we didn't want to be dependent on only 15 or 10 or 15 images. We wanted to bring the story we had in mind, and then use the size of the story and bring it into the form that we had in mind. And so we were completely independent in whatever we did over there. And although we were not sure that we could succeed in this way of working, in the end it totally succeeded. And so now, that's what really changed me. I mean, if you really want to do something,
It's possible.
It's possible
Yeah.
for everyone. So all complaining photographers, they should ask themselves like, okay, do I really want to do this? Because that's the most important
We'll have some
question.
questions later, I'm sure.
Okay.
Going back for a minute to the theme of the festival, truth and what's fake truth, etc., etc. Were you looking in the Sochi project for a certain specific story, or were you just going about and just listening to people? And if so, was there ever a moment when you could check your facts, when you knew this was the thing we should tell, it's the story that is really true, but the opposite of what the politicians and the officials are saying?
Mm-hmm.
Where did you know there was, where was your ground, where were you standing as a journalist?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we always say we're independent, but that doesn't mean that we are bringing facts or that we are bringing the truth. It's our truth, and these are our visions on the North Caucasus, on Sochi, on Abkhazia. That's also what we communicate all the time. And there's of course a solid base of research behind it. I mean, I'm working together with Arnold. He's, I think you mentioned a journalist, but he's a historian from his background. So, and he's a kind of a reading addict. So he's reading 5 newspapers and whatever. So he's finding a kind of solid base for what we are doing over there. And then in the end, we go there with this solid base, solid foundation in the background. And then we start talking to people, because all our stories are around the people living over there, and they are also told by the people living over there. So it's not so much a matter of truth or whatever, it's the truth from the people living over there. That's basically what we try to capture.
So it was, in that sense, it was an adventure. It was not, you didn't know who you would meet, so what you would hear. You would just go there and be there for a longer time, together with Arnold. And then decide on the spot which stories you would write down, what you would photograph, what kind of portraits you would make, etc., etc.
Yeah, I think one of the most beautiful things of this way of working is that you create a lot of coincidence. So we do a lot of research and then we plan to go somewhere, but you always end up somewhere else. And that's very important for our way of working, that we are being guided by the people living over there. That's basically our way of working, and it's very nice. One day you're standing up early in the morning and you think you will travel to whatever tourist resort to make some pictures over there, but at 11 in the morning you find yourself in a small little village in a farm, and you're already drunk because you have had too much vodka together with the World War II veteran in the village. But in the end, it doesn't matter.
Sounds
you get
like
to.
fun.
Yeah, it sounds pretty much like fun, and it is. I mean, I see it as a privilege to work in this way. But it's also very good, I think, for the stories, not to plan too much and not literally do what you already researched here in the Netherlands, because that's different.
So is this a way of working that you want to continue in the future?
Yeah, I would love to do that. Actually, I'm looking back with a lot of, I would love to start over again today. But life is life. Don't know if anyone of you is familiar with getting children over here, but that's, for example, part of life if you choose for it and if you get them, of course. Arnold and I both got our first child at the end of the Sochi project, our second child a couple of, let's say, 2 years ago. So we have a period that we cannot do a Sochi project. But we are thinking about it. And, yeah, sorry?
It's in the pipeline somehow.
There are so many plans in the pipeline, but yeah, maybe for a little bit later. Okay. But we have a kind of idea that 2020 will be our moment to start over again.
Okay, well, very curious. But let's talk about your new project, which is on show now in Utrecht, which is not far away, it's very close to home. Very different, or similar in a way. Can you say something about the person we see here?
Yeah, this is my neighbor. Was my neighbor actually, because I started living in the district Oldi. That's a working class district in Utrecht in 2004, right after my graduation from the Art Academy in Utrecht. And Kit was my neighbor. And first year I didn't photograph him, and I heard a lot of noise in his house because he was living there with his wife and their son, young son. But then his wife suddenly left with their son. I didn't know when, what, why, because I didn't knew them very well at that point. But they fled actually to a women's shelter and stayed there for a couple of years. So Kit also didn't know where they were, and that was the moment that I got acquainted more with Kit, and also sometimes asked him to make some photographs, but without having a project in mind at that point. Very often I simply bought a new camera, like I'm shooting everything on medium and large format film. And then I had a kind of strange camera from eBay or Marktplaats or something like that. And I had to do something, and he was the one around all the time. So I knocked on his door and said like, yeah, I have something strange again, can I make some portraits of you? So that was more or less the start of the project. And
he was okay with that? He just said, oh, come in.
Yeah, he always said, well, that's your hobby, you can do whatever you want. And I always explained like that I was a documentary photographer, but he never had the feeling that it was a serious thing. So he didn't know what I was doing. I think he considered it more or less as a similar situation, because I was living there and also working there in my home. And sometimes I was away for a while, and then he was kind of safety guard for my house. I always said like, I'm away for 3 weeks, please take care of my house. And then he was a really tough guy for my house. And when I returned, I was at home again. So I think he saw us as kind of similar people, being around home, and being a photographer was something not really familiar to him.
So you became friends more or less, or just good neighbors?
Good neighbors, I would say. Yeah, not friends, because that's something different, I think. But good neighbors, because sometimes he disappeared for a while. I didn't know what he was doing, but apparently he was in jail for some...
Were you good neighbors with the snake as well? Because he had a snake in his house?
The snake was a very good reason to make photos again, because the pitons, they needed to be fed every 6 weeks, and then they need a rat or a mice or whatever, and he was very proud on the snakes. Actually, it was his last...
There were more than one.
Sorry?
There were more than one.
Two.
Kleintje
and Pikachu. So, yeah, and he had them already for a very long time, and when he was feeding the snakes, there were always people around. He was inviting people in his house, and usually there were no people at all. Well, when I started editing the book...
Is this Bol.com coming with a rat? Or you just ordered it?
Well, he always had a money problem, so very often I bought the rat, because otherwise there wouldn't be a rat. Which I mean, you can now start blaming me for doing these kind of things, and in fact you're right, but on the other hand I also didn't know I didn't know what to do with it.
How much is a rat?
Well, the problem was that the reptile store was closed in Utrecht, so there you can buy, let's say, the cheap rats or the cheap mice for snakes, but it was closed, so we had to go to a normal pet store to buy these very cute small rats that you usually buy as pet rats for your small little kids. And he wasn't allowed to enter, or he could enter the store, of course, but they wouldn't sell him rats anymore because they knew what he was doing with it. So I was kind of, I had to go inside to buy a rat from my own money to give to him and feed to the snakes. However, that was his life as well, and bad. And this was kind of, I can say something about it as well, the previous one. I mean, our relation was, so until 2008, 2009, I didn't know I was working on a project. Then I started realizing like, okay, this is going to be a collection of portraits. It's becoming something. So I started making more photographs of him, and the previous one, for example, is a moment that he returned home at 6 o'clock in the morning. The police brought him home and he was found confused on the streets. He was suffering from all kind of epileptic attacks, I don't know what kind of attacks. He used drugs, although he always said like the only thing I do is smoking weed, but that wasn't really true. He had a lot of those kind of problems. A very aggressive guy, never to me, but could easily end up in a fight.
That he would do something?
No, for some reason not. I actually don't know now why I wasn't afraid, but yeah, it was. But that's also because after he died in 2013, he was found drowned in the Utrecht canals. At that point, he was really addicted, only hanging around in the center, city center. And after he died, I started diving into police reports. Sounds very easy, but it wasn't actually very easy to get this permission. But I wanted to figure out what happened after the last photo I shot of him. That was in 2012, and the moment he died in 2013. So there was a gap of a year, and I hardly saw him in this year. But I saw people taking over his house, for example. Sometimes he was standing there and he couldn't even enter his house because people didn't let him in. Apparently those were the dealers, the dealer guys who were giving him sometimes some drugs, and yeah, in return they took over his house to whatever, I don't know what. So his house transformed into a kind of a drug addict place. He couldn't enter anymore, and he was really. And there I also saw what he was doing in the police reports. I also saw what he was doing usually in the city center. And that was yeah, stealing, robbing, making a lot of noise, fighting, those kinds of things.
That's so good.
Not really good. No, and you see the reports then on the pages.
And did you ever show your photographs to him? Did you like see what the portraits I have of you? You talked with him about it? Because we are looking at the book. You made a book about him. Just about him.
Yeah, I already made a small book about him in 2010, and he was very proud of that book, so he was showing it to everybody, and I always brought him the photos, just made small little prints, and the prints also ended up in the house, of course. If you look carefully to the photos, then you see my pictures often in the background as well. And it was very strange, so he was quite proud on the photographs, and also there was a publication in a magazine, Volkskrant magazine, I think in 2008, and he was also very proud on that story. So there was no problem for him being published in whatever, he wasn't afraid for it. And but yeah, we're looking now to the exhibition.
Is this in the Centraal Museum?
Yeah. No, but the strange thing was actually that, for example, when he died as well, his family cleaned the house and took away all the photographs, and then I got his mourning card in my post box, and as well on the front as the inside of the mourning card, they also used images of me. So it's a very strange story that my images are more or less incorporating his life, and yeah, those kind of things are happening in a project like this.
And did you discuss with them making a book? Did they?
Yeah, the family, of course. Yeah. I asked them first for permission, but also informed them about every step within the process in bookmaking, exhibition making, and also informing them what my intentions were with this project, because that's very important. My project is not a commemoration of Kit or commemoration of his life or tribute to his life or whatever. My project is basically about the fact that I hope that people are more willing to talk to each other instead of talking about each other. That's the big intention. So I also informed them about my intentions with the project and explained them that they see the project differently and will always see the project differently because they know Kit, it's their relative. But they, by being so open about my intention, I think they also agreed on everything, and they were very proud visiting the exhibition, and yeah, they understand.
That's good. Yeah, so it's kind of cool. You have a new neighbor now?
Well, I have a new neighbor now, but I also made a whole series of my other neighbor on that spot as well, and that's Willem. Yeah. I could make a book about Willem as well, although the story is completely different. I mean, Willem is a very quiet man, but that's for the next Rotterdam photo, I think.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.